Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be having four lightning talks. And when we say lightning, we do mean lightning. There will be 10 minutes each. And these are going to be by higher ed and industry leaders sharing how they have used XR for education. So to kick things off, we'll have our first session by Sophie Thompson. She is the co-founder and CEO of Virtual Speech, a very popular virtual reality app. And she will talk about leveraging XR and AI for workplace readiness. And Sophie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Trish, and thank you to the whole Immerse team as well for running the event. So hello, everybody. I'm Sophie, as Tricia said. I'm CEO and co-founder of Virtual Speech, and we are an online platform specialising in the development of soft skills. So why am I here? I'm not going to focus solely on virtual speech, but I do want to share my expertise with you from working on virtual speech and solving the problem of workplace readiness with immersive learning over the last 9 years. So virtual speech was originally the first virtual reality app to overcome the fear of public speaking back in 2015. And we started it when we were at university. So at the end of 2015, I was studying for my master's. I had severe social anxiety. I wouldn't even order my own food in a restaurant. And I had an assessed presentation coming up in 3 months' time. I was already waking up feeling incredibly nervous about it, but there was no avoiding it. And this is when we realized that virtual reality is uniquely positioned to provide a psychologically safe space to practice a skill like public speaking so that you can improve both your skills, but crucially your confidence as well. And I realized that this is something that I was never taught at all at school or even at university. And it had shut off so many doors to me because I just didn't have the confidence to speak. So we created Virtual Speech originally as some nerdy fun to help ourselves. And now we are a library of off-the-shelf content focused on soft skills with the option to create your own content too. So I'm going to talk to you about my experience of immersive learning in general, working with over 400 organisations and over 500,000 students worldwide. So what is the workplace readiness challenge? So we've all heard of a widening skills gap, and research shows that 75% of employers struggle to find graduates with the right skills to fill their roles. And one of the problems is that the development of soft skills relies heavily on practical experience, of which there are limited opportunities to get this experience, and it's resource intensive in terms of both professor and faculty's time and the associated costs as well. And then we also have the problem of scalability. So faculty can't be dedicating time to every single student on top of their existing workloads and navigating their and all of their students' schedules. And this is where XR can come into things. So at Virtual Speech, we call this cycle the experiential learning cycle, and it's made up of 4 stages. So the first is practice. So with VR, learners can practice real-world situations as many times as they want, directly at the point of need. So for example, if a student has a presentation coming up, as I did, they can pick up their headset and practice in VR as many times as they want, and they have a safe space to fail without any real world consequences. So it's a totally safe environment for them to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes as well. Remember when I was about 8, my maths teacher told me that every mistake is a learning opportunity, and VR allows you to make those mistakes without real world consequences, so that when you are in the real world, you've already learned those mistakes. So you also get feedback in VR, and this can be in various formats, which I will talk about separately. But students can also get used to even that feeling of all eyes looking at them to help them build both their competence and their confidence. So to go back to the feedback element, with virtual speech, for example, advanced AI can give insights on both what the student has said and how they've said it. So that feedback is things like, in terms of delivery, it would be eye contact, body language, pace, volume, use of hesitation words, those kinds of metrics, and then how they've said it as well. So how the audience is likely to perceive them in a presentation, or if they're having a difficult conversation, did they show active listening skills? And they will also get quantifiable feedback of this as well, so they can more easily measure their improvements too. Students can then reflect on their performance based on the feedback they've been given and come up with a plan to turn that feedback into action before they practice again, and the cycle of growth then continues. So the main benefit of using AI in XR is how much it enhances the student experience and the impact on the student as well. So there's no branch learning, and each session with virtual speech, for example, is dynamic. And by utilising AI, the scenario becomes adaptive and hyper-personalised to each individual. So it doesn't matter what level a student is currently at, the system will adapt to their unique needs and respond to the conversation based on their unique input at that very moment in time. So the same student could go in every day across 5 days and have a different experience because it will adapt to them. And the learning is much more dynamic rather than static, as is the case sometimes with more traditional learning methods, I guess more like e-learning, where it's very much one and done. And the feedback that they receive is entirely personalised to that role play conversation that they've had or the presentation that they've just delivered. And this can be used across various disciplines and skills, from job interviews to difficult conversations, debating, pitching, practicing legal depositions, healthcare conversations, and much more. The possibilities really are endless when it comes to practicing those communication skills and those conversations. And at Virtual Speech, we provide over 50 modules off the shelf, but you can also create your own custom role plays and input your own feedback frameworks based on methodologies that you teach at your university. So, for example, we've had clients create their own role plays for mental health crisis, delivering bad news in healthcare settings, and even negotiating hostage situations, which was interesting. And I've just put a picture there of some of that feedback that students can receive, and you can click into each one of those to get a more detailed breakdown. So that's just feedback that was based on the delivery, so how they've said what they've said, and then the content feedback is much more detailed, and it will even reference things that they've said and how they could have said those things differently. I'm now going to take you through a couple of use cases so that you can see how universities are already using this technology. I did have a video here, but it wouldn't let me share the sound. So if you're interested in this one, let me know. This is basically just a role play with multiple avatars, and it's like a Shark Tank environment. So students can practice pitching for their own business, basically. In terms of, oh, it is going to play. There we go. So one of our clients is IE Business School, who are one of the leading business schools in Europe, and they use virtual speech for public speaking and storytelling, and have even integrated it into their curriculum with over 2,000 students every year going through virtual speech. Results they've seen using XR and AI for learning include a nearly 20% increase in skills in just 2 sessions, and an increase in student confidence of 24% in just 20 minutes. So again, that's 2 sessions, and really shows the impact of being able to practice and learn from your mistakes. One of our other clients is Aurora University, and they're using virtual speech, XR and AI technology in their careers department to help students land their dream jobs after graduation. So students can even upload their own CV or resume and the job description, and receive an entirely personalised interview complete with actionable insights on improvement, so they can go into the real thing fully prepared. And the software will even provide them with suggested responses for them to learn from as well. And so far, they've saved their careers colleagues over 4,300 minutes by using VR instead of having to do everything face-to-face. And before I leave you, because this time has flown by, I just wanted to quickly introduce you to RTC Antwerp and what they're doing in Belgium. So they're managing the largest rollout of XR across Europe, providing 700 high schools with access to VR. And I was just on site with them this week, meeting students and teachers who are using virtual speech, and we'll be releasing data and a video with key results next month, based on 150,000 students' experience using XR. So if you'd like to stay up to date with their data or have any questions about anything I've spoken about today, it'd be great to connect with you on LinkedIn, or here is my email address as well. So I'll just leave you with the thought really that the challenge of workplace readiness in higher education is one that we can all work together to solve, and XR and AI are perfectly positioned to do this. And yeah, at Virtual Speech, we'd love to partner with anyone who's looking to upskill their students and ensure they're prepared to enter the workforce. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Sophie. That was a great presentation. I'm really excited. Our next talk is actually going to complement Sophie's quite well. So we're going to be hearing from Dr. Joanna Pitura and Dr. Yuliya Asotska-Wierzba from the University of the National Education Commission. And they're actually going to be presenting a research study that they have conducted with virtual speech.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone.
Hello, wherever you are. My name is Yuliya Asotska-Wierzba.
My name is Joanna Pitura, and first of all, we would like to thank the organizers of this fantastic conference for inviting us to share our research. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And we'll be sharing the results of our study, which explored how VR and AI can improve teachers' training, and which we conducted in collaboration with our brilliant colleague, Regina Kaplan-Rakowski. And before we begin, we'd also like to note to the previous speaker, Sophie Thompson from Virtual Speech, our work wouldn't have been possible without the platform. So in fact, our participants described the AI-generated questions in virtual speech as thought-provoking, well-formed, and something that helps them organize the knowledge in their head. We think that these words perfectly capture the value of merging AI with immersive simulations. So today we will walk you through our study, and we will begin by sharing the challenge that we faced in our context, that is in the context of English as a foreign language teacher training. So first of all, our students are non-native teachers who find it difficult to teach grammar points, problems such as the present perfect tense, which does not exist. So the tense that does not exist in the Polish language. Secondly, of course, naturally, they have limited teaching experience before their real exposure in real classrooms, and many of them experience anxiety and uncertainty before their teaching practice. So we turned to the benefits of VR simulations. We thought about the benefits that they provide because of the safe environment in which our students can practice without real life consequences. But those simulations reflect real life, where our students can be active participants rather than just passive observers. So in addition, they can even practice as many times, repeat the scenarios as many times as they need. Existing research shows that the focus was mainly on classroom management and speaking special education needs. So it was the gap existed concerning the use of VR and AI specifically for language teacher training. So our focus was to investigate how VR and AI simulations can improve teachers' content knowledge when it comes to grammar and the ability to teach grammar. So,
Joanna?
Yes?
So sorry, I was just to say that the Google pop-up is showing on your screen if you just want to click the X to get rid of it.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
All right. And the ability to teach. So our study involved 17 pre-service teachers of English using virtual speech and Meta Oculus Quest 2. Our study was grounded theoretically in cognitive flexibility theory, which talks about applying knowledge in complex situations, in unexpected, unpredictable situations. And it sees knowledge development from lower level to more advanced through solving problems in real life. So in our study, we used virtual speech to make it possible for our students to practice the present perfect tense to a group of virtual B-level students, which is an intermediate level. So the students' task was to present the structure. They could use the board, they could write examples or draw pictures to illustrate their points. The classes were conducted entirely in English. And after they finished, they received AI-generated questions from virtual students. When they finished teaching, when they completed this phase, they were invited to take part in a qualitative survey with open-ended questions where they responded and shared their experiences about how they applied knowledge in this scenario and what adaptive strategies they employed. They also reflected on their teaching and also on the impact the impact of this simulation on their content and grammar, specifically grammar knowledge. So this is the procedure. And now, Yuliya. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Asha. And let's then proceed with our findings and let's have a look at our research questions. Well, our first research question looked at how pre-service teachers applied their grammar knowledge in VR, the challenges they faced, and how they adapted. Most relied on familiar teaching methods. So they explained grammar rules, gave sentences, examples, just as they would in real classroom. However, VR introduced some unique challenges. Without real student reactions, meaning no facial expressions or body language, it was hard for them to tell if the students understood the lesson. Additionally, stress played a big role. Some students felt anxiety. To adapt, some switched to a lecture-style approach, others used a virtual board or gestures, and a few even named the virtual students to make the experience feel more human. These adaptation strategies show that VR forces trainees to think on their feet, which is a crucial skill for managing unpredictable classroom. Okay, and let's now move to the second research question, which looked at how the VR simulation encouraged reflection. One key takeaway was that VR provided a safe yet immersive space for trainees to practice teaching grammar hands-on. It helped them identify subtle gaps in their knowledge of the present perfect tense, language use, and terminology. Confidence was another significant factor. While some felt anxious at first, they quickly realized they could present grammar concepts successfully in VR. Also, the AI-generated questions played a huge role. They added unpredictability, forcing trainees to think spontaneously, clarify their explanations, and adjust their teaching strategies in real time. This process helped participants refine their teaching, prepare for unexpected classroom situations, and pinpoint areas for improvement. Moving on to the third research question, we examined how the VR experience impacted participants' content knowledge. Our findings show that VR provided a space for experimentation, helping participants reinforce their understanding of the present perfect tense and how to explain practical rules better. What's interesting is that many went beyond the task, incorporating cultural context, contextual examples into their explanations. AI-generated questions also played a key role here. They help participants to refine their explanations and become more adaptable when handling unexpected student inquiries. Well, overall, most participants felt that the experience translated well to real classrooms, which increased their confidence and sense of preparedness for real-world teaching. To bring everything together, what do our findings tell us about the role of VR/AR in teacher training? First, VR bridges the gap between theory and practice. It offers a structured, low-risk space for trainees to apply their content knowledge before live classroom teaching. Reflection is a key takeaway. The AI-driven feedback helps participants refine their pacing, language use, and teaching strategies, allowing them to improve their instructional techniques. But beyond that, VR AI builds resilience. Trainees had to manage technical issues, teaching stress, and unpredictable student questions. Challenges, actually, they will face in real classrooms, right? Looking ahead, AI in education needs to evolve. Future development should focus on creating more lifelike virtual students that provide adaptive and emotionally intelligent feedback, making interactions more realistic and meaningful. And finally, there is still more to learn. Future research should focus on measuring the real impact of VR training in classrooms. It's important to determine whether it's reducing teaching anxiety and improves lesson delivery. To get a clearer picture, both qualitative and quantitative research is needed. And here you will see the references that we used for our theoretical part. And we have also decided to include our QR code. If you scan it, you will be able to see our publication that we wrote with our colleague, Regina Kaplan-Rakowski. Thank you for
Thank you very
attention.
much.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Next up, I'm just going to transition us really quickly. We have Moody and Dr. Teresa Valdez, who are going to be talking about how they have expanded language learning horizons in their higher education institution at the University of Rochester. So Megan and Teresa, I'll turn it over to y'all.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation, Expanding Language Learning Horizons, XR and AI Collaboration in Higher Education. With me, I have my colleague, Meg, and our presentation will focus on three main areas. We're going to start with a quick overview of our two centers to then go more into depth on our work and the integration of X at our institution, to then finally talk to you a little bit about the impact on learning and teaching with these tools in our institution. As mentioned, we are kicking our presentation with the overview of the centers, and I'll pass the word to my colleague, Meg.
So just a little bit about Studio X. We opened in fall of 2022. And Studio X is the hub for extended reality at the University of Rochester, and we empower the U of R community to change the way we see the world through immersive technologies by providing the space, technology, expertise, and community to transform teaching, research, and learning. So we have a 3,000 square foot interdisciplinary space based in the libraries, and we lend a variety of equipment, including VR headsets, 360 cameras, audio devices, 3D scanners, iPads, and more. And we share our expertise through workshops and consultations. Our staff also includes a full-time developer as well as a large team of trained student employees, and we partner with faculty on their research and teaching.
So the Language Center was established in 2016, and it is the hub for language learning on campus, also teaching. Here, different departments and language programs find a centralized space that serves both faculty and students. Meg, please. Our spaces spread through Frederick Douglass building, which is a very centralized building on campus and includes a living room area where most of our conversation hours happen, where our events also happen. These conversation hours, just as a small note, are part of course syllabi. It is a multi-use space that next to it, we find a multi-use room with Air Media and all the technology available for language teaching and learning. Our small library also serves our students with the textbooks adopted, and we also have those that are digital. We also have a fully equipped kitchen with streaming, which is very unusual in a university setting. We also have an international TV area where students can easily download a free app to listen to the channel of their choice, all foreign languages. If a language is not there, they can come to our living room and we'll help them supply and find content in that language. So both Meg and I are a lot of technology in our centers, and we were introduced and
Yes, so we were introduced via one of my colleagues in the library, our language librarian, and this is a key point that we'd like to share, that it's really important to leverage your network's connections. Both the Language Center and Studio X, we're pretty small, we're mighty, but it's really important that we leverage those connections to work smarter and not harder.
Exactly. So, and as after our first meeting, we decided, no, we need to work more, we need to collaborate. And we understood that one of the ways that we needed to bring faculty was through a workshop. Why? Because we need to reach out to them in a way that Studio X was as the connection between what happens in the classroom, but also what is available to them to embed in the class inside and outside of their space. And this momentum was built with a workshop at Studio X, where they learn more about the tools, where they gain the confidence they needed to see the tools in as a positive avenue for their classroom space. In terms of the tutors, we also thought for language tutors, how we're going to work with them. And we understood that also they needed some practice and they needed to have a workshop. So we work with them with a specific workshop that gave them the training they needed through Studio X. That was all Studio X. And then my job was to include what they learned into our conversation hours. And each language had to prepare a conversation hour around VR and the technology. And that was essential because we saw how that boosts confidence. And we had wonderful activities, including one that was a scavenger hunt in VR for the French session. It was very popular and gave us wonderful ideas. Bringing both faculty and tutors to Studio X was a key component.
Yeah, so as Teresa mentioned, the workshops were held in Studio X, so they were able to see our context and who we were. And it was really important that my team, presented possibilities and we really listened, because we needed to hear about the language faculty and the tutors or the content experts, and we needed to show them the tools that were available and then let them sort of brainstorm about how they could actually implement the tools. So we saw them do new things that we hadn't even anticipated because we gave them the space. So we also use specific apps like Wander, which is Google Earth and VR, Mondly, an immersive language learning tool, and Noun Town for VR vocabulary practice. And then later in the semester, we also had the language tutors present at Studio X's annual student showcase. So they got to talk about the programming that they had created.
And then there are a couple of lessons learned throughout this process that we maintain, and we keep learning with new lessons. But very important is that in terms of faculty, for our faculty, we have to look at integration with reassurance. The faculty needs to feel comfortable that we are not replacing the classroom or them. This is another tool. On the other hand, is this collaborative environment that both Studio X and the Language Center were able to create actually were essential for the success of our initiatives. We added cookies, we added beverages, we added fun conversation, relaxed conversation around all these topics in order to reduce stress, anxiety, and even questioning, why am I here?
And we saw some really great results. There's been very high usage and student interest in the tools to practice languages. We had the Language Center staff coming over here every week to borrow so much equipment that we decided to do long-term reservations so that students could have access to the equipment on demand. And also, we have excellent groups of student employees. And this year, we had a student from each center meet up and co-create new programming together. So later this month, they'll be hosting a language virtual scavenger hunt in Studio X.
In terms of learning a language, VR is a component that is essential nowadays. It allows us to travel without leaving our room. And not every student is able to go and study abroad. We are not able to be there every week. So it offers unique opportunities for cultural inclusion and exploration. It is by definition an authentic material and opens doors for many uses, many avenues for language acquisition and also for language proficiency. Outside of the classroom, it does promote engagement and practice. Students have opportunities to practice without the pressure of being observed or judged, and that fosters self-confidence as a speaker and also improves proficiency.
So it's also increased visibility for Studio X and helped us create new partnerships with faculty. Studio X is a relatively new space and program. We're kind of tucked away on the first floor of the STEM library. So we've been introduced to more language faculty. For example, we've met with Myung-hee Cho, who's a Korean faculty member or teaches Korean, and she's brought her class in to look at Korean festivals with YouTube VR. And Teresa actually has a new course that she is leading this semester on language, street art, and performance in Portuguese-speaking cultures. And she's been using Wander to look at street graffiti with her students, for example. There's also a crossover with the Religion and Classics department, and we've seen multiple faculty from that department come in, such as Steph Batista, who's an archaeologist. Has been using Wander to look at climate zones in Central and South America. And just to touch briefly on some next steps for Studio X, we have faculty coming in to create their own course content. Justin Dwyer, also in Religion and Classics, is creating original course content with 360 cameras that he's borrowing from us. His classes center on ancient sites in Greece and Rome, and the course content wasn't readily available, so he's making his own and sharing that with his students. And we are also, of course, very excited about the possibilities for AI and how to integrate that into XR. We have a subscription to virtual speech, and Teresa and I have been brainstorming about how to use that with the language faculty and tutors, so we're really excited about that as well. Just to wrap up, we're so excited that we could meet with you today and share a little bit about what we've been working on. Please, we'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have, and thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. So now I'm just going to introduce our last speaker, Dr. Ulf Schuetze, who's going to be actually talking about how our brain processes talking to AI virtual agents. So I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a professor of second language acquisition. So my talk is specifically on how my students who learn a second language, how I can use AI and VR for them to practice that language. And I work in the context of a university, so I work with adult learners. And every time I talk to colleagues about this, about new research projects, after a while, the question comes up, like, what is different, like talking to a human being versus talking to what we call this conversational AI agent. And so I thought this time I actually start with explaining that. So when we talk to a human being in our first language or second language, doesn't matter. About 20 years ago, the common thinking was we have Broca's and Wernicke's area in our brain that is for speech comprehension and speech production. Broca's area is actually much more involved than what we know now than what we knew 20 years ago. It includes the phonological loop, which is an area that can park information because, we have to process several words at the same time. So we can put some words aside while we're processing others. Then, of course, we have the auditory cortex, not just for listening, but also we're constantly monitoring. We're using that when we speak, and the motor cortex for actually speaking. So this was what most people who are in language acquisition or language learning know about the brain, what is active, which is accurate, but it's not complete, right? This whole area, the technical term is the perisylvian cortex that connects everything. Because what is also really active is when we listen and speak is the limbic system, right? And this is mostly research from the last 20 years on how this is actually connected to the language areas. So of course we have the hippocampus for memory, but we also have the amygdala processing emotions. We have the entorhinal and perirhinal cortices, which are used, which they're kind of relay stations to memory and to the senses. We have the senses like the olfactory bulb or the occipital lobe, so that's for smelling and vision. And most of all, we have so of course we also have the auditory cortex in green, so that is the connection to the language, to the perisylvian cortex, or like the language network. And then we have the thalamus, I just showed up there last, which is kind of a relay station. And the thing is, all of this is also active when we listen or speak. And it's important that it's active because that helps us processing information. So the issues we have often with learners in the university context, like language learners, is that while as children, when we grew up and learned our first language or also our second or third, the limbic system was very active. So, you have like when the child is learning the word for an apple, there's the smell, the touch, the taste of an apple, all of that is being processed. And then part of how that information with that word is recorded in the hippocampus. So that is to memory. And then the problem is, if we're in a university context and we learn another language, in this case, a French word, these senses are just not that activated because we're in a classroom with, 30 other students. All of them are starting to learn French for the first time. So in the long run, that is a problem because without that activation of the limbic system or sufficient activation, language learning becomes really boring. So the question is then, how can we use the technology to actually change that, right? Because it is both the perisylvian cortex and the limbic system, to put this in an overview, that needs to be activated for successful language learning. Okay. Or if you put it in like a more stabilized form, on the one hand, you have the technical terms are the phonemes, lexemes, the morphemes, and the syntax, that is the word order. And then on the other hand, you have, the audiovisual information, the senses, associations, and the emotions that are all part of speech, right? Now, I talked to my niece, so this is my niece, so there's no copyright violations with any sort of pictures. Who is learning French? Ideally, of course, you go to France, you have a great time, you pick it up because you're fully immersed, right? That is the best possible way. But it's also really not affordable. We heard that in the first keynote talk this morning, right? We have to be practical. And, the whole idea is to use technology to our advantage so we can provide something, in my case, for my students, they can use and that benefits them. So the question is, how do I get this into a phone or into a VR headset? Right? So this scenario. And what is really important, once we do that, so we can create these simulations, sure, we can create an avatar. And we have the speech software, the latest release of the speech software I saw from OpenAI in December was really good. It's another step up, so it's constantly evolving. But it's not perfect. Human speech is still superior, right? And one of the areas we really have to look at is attention. I think that was also mentioned today already. So when we look at attention in our brain, we have so right there, that's called the dorsolateral area in the prefrontal cortex. That is used to direct, divide, and switch attention to like incoming information. Then we have the orbifrontal part that is used to make decisions. Then we have in red the anterior cingulated cortex. That is kind of a relay station, once to the amygdala, so to the emotions, but also to the parietal cortex for visual and for spatial information. Yeah, that was spatial information. And it actually, so what's in red also overlaps a bit with Brodmann's area 46, which also overlaps with Broca's area. And that's what sorts out interference in our brain. So every time we learn another language, the thing is that also our first language is also active. So we constantly have to focus that only one language is coming out when we speak, right? So right now, so obviously German is my first language. So I constantly have to suppress German while I'm speaking English. So that is also happening through attention in connection with the language network in Broca's area. Okay, so we call it the neural network of attention. So if we put this all together, So you recognize all the areas of attention here, but you also recognize the connections through Broca's and Wernicke's area, the motor cortex, so the language network. You also recognize the connections to the limbic system, with the amygdala, the senses, the thalamus. What I left out here is memory, hippocampus, because that's kind of the second step, right? So the main goal is that you actually sustain attention long enough to give the words that are grammatically encoded a chance to be successfully processed to memory with the help of like the senses and the emotions and all the other things you pick up, right? And that is the biggest problem right now, when we look at what we call conversational AI agents. And this is already my last slide, because although a lot of progress has been made, it is important to, right now, at this point of research and development, it is important to remember that while human speech is very interactive, dynamic, authentic, based on experiences, when you have the AI speech, so like, an AI agent, there's a bit of a problem with the register. It's either very formal or informal. You can tell it what to do, but it does not change it by itself. So it cannot change. So you have to tell it from conversation to conversation what to do, which is not a very natural conversation. It cannot change like mid-sentence, etc. There's certain things it does not understand. And that's not a criticism. The development has been significant, but it's something to keep in mind when you give your learners tasks like, use this avatar and practice. Because you have to think very carefully, not just about the goal, but also the type of interaction, particularly the frequency. So how often should they practice? And the time of exposure, so the length of each session, so to speak. And similar, this goes for the natural reactions, so like engaging the limbic system, hand-eye coordination, body language, eye movement, etc. It's not quite like a human being. And what our brain then, the kind of issue our brain has is that it recognizes that, sometimes a bit earlier, sometimes a bit later, but as soon as it recognizes it, our brain is not as engaged as it should be. And it gets a little tiring. And when it gets tiring, then, you lose your concentration, and then there's not much of a learning effect. Okay? So my experience is that this type of information is really helpful for a lot of instructors, but also students. Hopefully, it's also helpful for my understanding is in this particular conference from IMMERSE, who work in all kinds of other disciplines. And that when we look at research and development, like moving forward, the next level would be probably to make the software, etc., a bit more flexible, right? But most of all, to really think carefully about how you use it and explain to your students exactly the plus and minuses. And that's it. Just gonna.
Awesome. Thank you.